Hi, Shannon.
Hey,
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm pretty good, thanks.
Good.
For people who don't know, who haven't read the title of what the video will be, Shannon is the researcher for Breathworks. Um, and well, yeah, so Shannon, why don't you just kick off with sort of how you got involved with Breathworks and uh,
Yeah. So basically, our uni. So I'm on a psychology course, and it has the option to do like an internship year. And so I was looking for some placements. Um, and so originally I thought I might want to go into marketing. So I got one placement in marketing, and then I didn't really like that. So, well, just where I was, and I didn't really like that. So I then came to Breathworks because I'd had a friend of a friend had done teacher training there, and she said I'll get in touch with them. They might have some psychology internship. So they didn't have anything in sort of like the creative area of marketing, what I was looking at the time. But then they had it in research. And that
mm.
was sort of another thing that I've been thinking of doing. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll try that. Like I'll try two different things.
Did
And
you
so
done any mindfulness practice before then? Were you interested in mindfulness or?
it was weird. It was like very, the reason I'd heard of breathwork is because I'd only just started practicing mindfulness. And the person who actually told me about mindfulness at all to begin with was my mum's friend from work, who's actually had just trained to be a mindfulness teacher at Breathworks. And she sort of,
Okay.
I was having a full-on anxiety crisis, and she basically, my mum said, please just go and see my friend. And she sat me down and she explained mindfulness to me. And
Mm.
it was like one of the only things that I was actually like, okay, this is a complete different way of thinking. Like, I've not tried this. So it was kind of in that same year that I'd first had my eyes open to mindfulness, that I'd been put in touch with Breathworks for my internship. So it kind of all happened at the same time.
Oh, okay, interesting. So you
Yeah.
were doing research while you were actually learning it yourself.
Yeah, so I was learning little bits. I mean, don't go fully into detail into it in my course because we've got to do a bit of everything. But I was kind of, yeah, I was learning it. I was doing mindfulness academically, in my personal life, and then as my job. So just my life just became mindfulness, and it was great.
Oh, cool. So can you tell us about like what research you were doing, and how you were getting the data and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so with the dissertation we have to do at the end, you have to sort of pick an area that's current and new. And so when I was looking at the literature in mindfulness, I could see like a lot had been done on the stress, a lot had been done on health courses and things like that. But interestingly, what hadn't been done really was looking at the online courses and comparing them to face-to-face courses. So some studies did look at online courses and found good effects, but they compared it with like a control group who weren't doing mindfulness at all, or it was in, something like CBT or something instead, and there actually wasn't hardly any data that was looking at online mindfulness courses compared to the same course but face to face. So
Right.
that's kind of where I saw the gap, and I was like, perfect, Breathworks do an online mindfulness course and a face to face one. So yeah, so I
For your internship?
oh no, sorry, this was my dissertation. My internship, it feels like it was a while ago now. It was a couple of years ago. The key things that I remember from that, because we've done very similar things since, so it's just hard to gauge from what
Sure.
year. Key
Yeah.
things was reductions in pain catastrophizing. There was reductions in pain interference.
So catastrophizing is uh,
Catastrophizing is a big one because that's kind of the idea that it's the kind of idea of primary and secondary suffering. So like you're having the pain, but if you're sort of thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to stop me from doing this, and how am I ever going to do this, you kind of add another level of suffering.
yeah.
And it actually, from recent literature that I've read, it actually is the pain catastrophizing that is what predicts people to go to the doctors and to be on long-term medication, things like that, rather than
Right.
the pain severity. So people can have different severity, but it's how much they sort of, it gets to them in their heads. That's what triggers them to sort of go off and seek more treatment and feel
Right. Right.
depressed.
And then pain interference is how much it impacts their daily life. Is that right?
Yeah, so you can kind of see how those two interact really. So I guess a big thing that we're looking at in breathworks is sort of, okay, mindfulness, we never really say it's there to physically reduce the pain, although actually quite a lot of people say that they do report physical pain reductions, but the aim of mindfulness is to help with the secondary suffering. And in doing that, that seems to sort of improve quality of life and reduce depression and anxiety around the pain.
Great. It would be awkward at this point if it turned out that Breathworks courses are completely useless.
No,
for people to find out how.
Consistently good. Like like I say, well, I think my internship was 2 years ago, between 2 and 3 years ago now.
Yeah.
I've been looking at pretty similar things, like slightly different measures, but similar, depression, anxiety, pain interference, and without fail, they have all improved after a course. Like sometimes it didn't reach statistical significance. So you can't say it was it was very, very, very unlikely to be due to chance. But most of the time we had significant results, and even when we didn't, there was always like an improvement. What tends to happen is that we have series of questionnaires, so we have a pre and a post course one, but then we also do follow-ups because they're really important. So it's important to see whether the effects are still sustained 3-12 months later, because that's kind of what people really come in for. They're coming to learn like lifelong tools.
Yeah.
And even though it is 8 weeks, we have seen still statistical significant improvements 3 and 12 months later.
So your research, I should probably just do a shameless plug here, it's been funded by the Breathworks Foundation. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So that's kind of who I'm working for. Yeah.
Cool. So Breathworks Foundation also give bursaries to people doing mindfulness for health courses and mindfulness for health retreats and things like that, and partner up with hospices and research and things like that. So yeah, sorry to derail you there about you started talking about your dissertation and like, so you're looking into online courses, is that right, for mindfulness?
Yeah, so what I was looking at on my dissertation, was mainly the comparison between online and face-to-face courses, because I was interested that it hadn't been compared before. And I think that in the literature, if you're just comparing online versus a control group or face-to-face versus a control group, you might find that results are saying, oh, both methods are really good, but they're not comparing against each other. So for those people that are like thinking, should I be doing it online or face-to-face, there's not much to go off.
Right.
So that's kind of the idea for it. And
did you have any sort of theories about what you were going to find at the beginning?
Yeah, sort of just so the main thing that I thought was going to be the difference was like the idea of social connection. And I thought there's a lot of research out there that's to do with sort of having people in a close proximity makes you form relationships better, tactile, being able to touch, being able to sort of see that person there in real life sort of helps the bondings. And I think that when you are looking at a group setting,
at the moment I'm feeling no bonding with you at all, so
exactly. Whereas when I come in the office, everyone's happy.
It's like fireworks.
It is. Yeah, so when I thought that, given that both of those courses are group courses, I wonder how the group element would be different. And I wondered if, because you haven't, on an online group, you haven't got that physical sort of face-to-face, say, shared environment, I wondered if that would make a difference in the improvements people made, basically. I wondered if the social, because a lot in mindfulness as well, people, researchers hadn't looked at, they looked at depression, they looked at pain, they looked at things like that, but they hadn't looked at anything to do with isolation and social issues. And I think that if you have got chronic pain, can be very isolating.
Yeah.
And I think it was strange to me that researchers hadn't looked at that, because maybe one of the things about mindfulness is it helps people feel understood. And
especially Breathworks courses have a kind of real emphasis on that. It does seem like a bit of a gap in there.
Yeah.
Cool. So what did you find?
Okay, so so the first thing to say is that my sample size was very small, because basically Breathworks at the moment are running less online courses than the face-to-face. So I had a decent amount of face-to-face participants, but not many online. And so I was originally going to do a purely quantitative study. I was purely going to look at pain catastrophizing, social isolation, always measured by questionnaires, so you can get a score for each one. And when I realised that I wasn't going to have enough data, and again, this was a dissertation, so it was only over about 6 months, which isn't ideal.
Yeah.
I was like, right, I need to pad this out. So I looked into doing qualitative interviews as well,
Right.
because I thought, I'm not sure how much data I'm going to find, and I think that it'd be good to expand on it. So from the quantitative side of it, I found that the only significant improvements were for the face-to-face group.
Okay.
But you have to be a bit wary, because you just don't know if that's because the sample size was a lot smaller in the online group.
Yeah.
But the improvements, I've got it just written up on here. So there were statistical significant improvements in pain severity, pain interference, pain catastrophizing, emotional distress, and mindfulness. That was all in the face-to-face group.
Okay.
Similar improvements found in the online, but they just weren't significant.
Okay.
But the interesting thing really was when I looked at the interviews. So I then interviewed some people, this was after they'd taken part in the course, from both the online and the face-to-face, and really similar themes were found. So the main themes, I've got them written down here as a complete sort of overview summary, and then maybe I'll just pick out a few key quotes that I thought were quite nice. So the main themes were, can you still see me if I'm looking at something else?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I don't know. So the main themes were seeking social support. So it showed that it was a really important factor. Finding positivity in the present and sort of focusing on that rather than worrying sort of backwards or forwards. Feeling that they'd been on a personal journey. And then the differences between the two were like difficulties with the course platform.
Okay. Just technical difficulties.
A bit of everything for both. So basically, that's really where people highlighted pros and cons of the course. So for online, people felt that sometimes for face-to-face, people felt sometimes getting there was hard.
Right.
They might find it tiring to fit around their day. They might find it hard to work around their job.
Yeah.
So
I guess doing a mindfulness for health course, quite often they've got really severe conditions that mean like the online course is the only thing they can do. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. So you kind of had that as a negative of the face-to-face course, and that's really why I wanted to look at online courses, because if you are in a lot of pain, or even if it's not pain, if you've got a really bad sort of anxiety condition or something like that, it's good to have that option. So that's why I wanted to look at it. So the face-to-face, people had sort of the logistics of getting there, and then the online, a few technical difficulties, but they said they were very quickly overcome. And what else did they say? I think the other thing with the online course was they just felt the teaching style was different to the face-to-face. So what they liked about the face-to-face was that you had that classic kind of teacher with like the sketch pad and interactive activities with each other and things like that, whereas the online course at the time, because it has changed since, but at the time was a bit more sort of like descriptive and sort of hoping that the participants would go away and read the book and teach themselves a bit. Right. So it's supportive rather than teaching.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. But then the benefit of that is that you had people all around the world doing it at any time that suited them. So yeah, that's where the differences were. But in terms of the similar things people found, it was very similar. Like, everyone felt they'd been on a journey. Everyone felt that they'd found new positivity. So kind of like the core elements were very similar across groups.
So what are you up to at the moment in terms of Breathworks research and like personal, because I know you're started doing your master's
Yeah.
Recently. So
yeah, so I'm doing my master's now, but because of health, I'm doing it over 2 years. So I don't actually start my dissertation until next year, it'll be next academic year, so sort of 2019, 2020. But I know what I'm doing already. So basically what is quite useful is when I'm in my Breathworks job, aside from uni, when we're looking at designing a new survey, it's quite useful to think what really needs to be found out in like the academic world as well, because if we can make our research quite like sophisticated and something that we can actually present at conferences, and something that's, as well as just telling us, okay, yes, our courses work, they make people feel great, it's kind of like, that's more of a service, that's I guess more of a service evaluation, which all companies do. But I think what we're trying to do as well is be quite active in like the research field. And so if we can find areas that are really important and potentially under researched, then that's a good way to sort of direct our questions, because we do a lot of work with academics at different universities and different partnerships and things like that. So it's always good to have something that they'd be interested in as well. So in that, when we came to looking at our new Mindfulness for Health survey, which hasn't gone out yet, so keep your eyes peeled, we were like, what's the main issues? What do we really need to look at? We sort of look back at what we've already looked at. We said, okay, we've already found, quality of life goes up, great. Sleep goes up, great. Pain goes down, great. Okay, kind of don't need to repeat this now. We found that, like I say, pretty consistently over the last couple of years. So what really needs to be done now is looking at how we can reduce like the burden on healthcare, so NHS, sort of just noting sort of how chronic pain can cost quite a lot if there's not really, trying to how to put it, basically it'd be interesting to see whether mindfulness courses can help reduce the amount that people are having to go to the hospital or to the doctor or be on pain medication. Like some of that might be necessary, but it's trying to shift, where possible, self-management over kind of having to go through that, because people don't want to go through that anyway. People don't want to be at the hospital and don't want to be on lots of tablets if they don't need to and things like that anyway. So it's kind of a good thing for them being able to manage their pain independently, and also a good thing sort of for society.
And like you say, gets interest in research, because if you reduce the burden on healthcare, that's that's what researchers are interested in, I guess. And
exactly. And if the NHS and sort of healthcare providers, if they start seeing, an 8-week mindfulness course actually reduces how many times people go to visit the GP in a few months, that's something that they can look into invest in. Like NHS already invests in CBT. It's like the first thing you get offered if you have anxiety or depression or anything like that. So it would be
and of course mindfulness-based cognitive therapy for who've had depression in the past.
So it'd be great to at some point in the future get to the point where people know mindfulness works, but to have it sort of proven in a science and academia, it'd be nice, at some point, if people went with pain to their GP and they could offer mindfulness funded or at least reduced. So
cool. Let's hope so. Cool.
And there's a good chance as well. I'm optimistic about what we're going to find in this study, as in if mindfulness reduces pain, because what I said earlier about pain catastrophizing and pain interference, we've seen that from looking at the literature, those two things are what predicts hospital visits. So if we can reduce catastrophizing and we can reduce interference, common sense and previous research would suggest that we can then bring those things down as well. So it will be interesting.
Is there anything else that you wanted to add that I haven't remembered to ask you about?
Please participate. No, seriously.
Those questionnaires.
We're working, so we know, like, it's so annoying when you get sent questionnaires and it's everyone's lives are so busy. But I have really tried now on these new ones to make them as easy to answer as possible. They're a lot shorter than the other ones. We've really worked on how we can reduce the burden. And they really should only now take about 15 minutes. And if you can give 15 minutes of your time, even if that's 5 minutes here and there whilst you're boiling the kettle or whatever, it doesn't have to be all in one go. It's going to help massively, because it's so great to have testimonials of people saying how good the courses are. But we can only really convince commissioners and sort of get funding for more research, funding for more bursaries, if we actually get those statistics down on the page. So your 15 minutes here and there are like going to help so many people. So please.
Cool. All right, great, Shannon. That's been really interesting to talk to you about this stuff.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Overall, yeah. Well, I'll take it easy. I'll see you. You're in the office tomorrow, aren't you?
I'll see you tomorrow, where we can have tactile interactions. Oh my god, that sounds
Oh, cool. All right, Phil, thanks, Shannon.
It's been great.
Fun. Take it easy.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Bye.
Sorry, my cat plays fetch, so I might be throwing this throughout the thing. She literally brings it to me. And she is. Like
fetch. That's so sweet.
Yeah, she loves this. She like has to go. It's over there. Look. She has to go and chase it and bring it back.